Wow. You're just a little puppy.
We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order of the Education and Youth Committee of the Georgia State Senate. And as we start, I will ask Senator Steele, would you leave us in a word of prayer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Please bow. Father, thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for all these folks gathered to talk about the welfare of the children in our great state. God, please keep us focused on what is in their best interest and not ours, and that we are here for your service. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, sir. All right, we have three bills, Senate Bill 152, Senate Bill 74, and Senate Bill 124. I'm going to try, my goal is to get all three of these done within the hour, and we have until 3 o'clock until we have a hard stop. So I'm going to give 20 minutes to each, and so well, Senator Dolezal was here.
He'll be right back.
He'll be right. Well, that's. Senator Dolezal. Senate Bill 152.
All right, Mr. Chairman, Senate Bill 152 is a addition for eligibility to our current, well, I say current, our currently under implementation Georgia Promise Scholarship, and it allows the biologic and adopted foster children of a family who has been a foster parent in the last 10 years to be eligible for the Georgia Promise Scholarship. It precludes a number of the existing requirements, such as the residency within a bottom 25% school system, previous year QBE allotment, et cetera, but does keep in place a number of the qualifications, and I have that current code section here that I can highlight for you. They still need to be a Georgia resident for 1 year. They still need to essentially meet the HOPE scholarship eligibility as it relates to legal status in the United States, as it relates to immigration. They cannot be a recipient of any other scholarship funding under the Georgia Special Needs Scholarship or the GOAL Scholarship. And the parents need to sign an agreement that all the other parents need to sign related to the use of funds. So, Mr. Chairman, what we're looking to do here is to reward those families who have taken care of the most vulnerable children in the state of Georgia, and reward them by essentially giving them preferred positioning in the Georgia Promise Scholarship Program.
All right. Any questions from the committee?
Oh, yeah, you got to down here.
Number 12?
You want to go first? No. We all three raise our hands. So
Okay.
tell us what order you want us to go in.
We'll start right here, closest with the closest, was Senator Count.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did have a question just as it relates to like the funding for the voucher program, because it says age 4, but if it comes from K-12, doesn't it start at age 5?
So it allows the current program is exclusive to rising kindergartners.
Yeah.
So it would not apply to pre-K, but you could have a scenario where a kindergartner was entering early, and so that's where the age comes from.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it is specifically for
K-12.
K-12.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'm 11.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Dolezal. Question, so this applies to biological or adopted children of foster parents, but am I right that it doesn't apply to foster kids?
Correct.
Are you concerned at all about the optics of that?
No.
Tell me why.
Because foster children have temporary placements, they're typically not in a scenario where if you reference, for example, the parents are the ones that are signing the agreement, that these children are not with their parents. So it would be really not within the confines of the current law functionally. And as you know, Senator, these children often are in short placements or longer placements, but they very often are temporarily in a school system and then return, hopefully, to their home school system if the situation back home can improve.
Do you think that the way the law is currently constructed, for example, not even bringing this, potential change into the conversation, but the way it's currently constructed, do you think that foster kids need, the right placement less than the other children that we've already given the Promise Scholarship to?
I'm not sure I follow your question. Do they deserve the right? Say it again.
Yeah. Do you think they need it less? Do you think that would that be an appropriate?
No, I mean, I would love to see as many students have school choice in the state of Georgia as possible, but as it relates to the functionality of the ESA, which essentially is we deposit money into an account that the parents then make a request of the agency to approve. I think that the asking foster parents to do that when you may have a child who is placed with 2 or 3 different foster families within a given period of time, it's just not a realistic usage of this program. I certainly think that those students, either in their home district or if they ultimately are adopted, will be great candidates for placement within the ESA program.
Right. So it sounds like you would support that. You just haven't
I would.
done that here.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit more, as I've thought about this, it's a little bit of a difficult process as to how that request of funds happen and the inconsistency often that unfortunately these children are living with on a daily basis doesn't really lend itself to applying to school, getting approved to a school, then attending that school, or being homeschooled. So those are really the 2 different uses of the current scholarship program.
Great. I have one more question if you don't mind.
Sure, I don't mind.
Okay. So I'm aware, and I didn't follow particularly closely, but I'm certainly aware that there was, it was not exactly a smooth rollout related to like the list of schools, and there were like lists coming out and going back. And,
Yeah, it got pulled back twice, I think. Yeah.
Right. Okay, that's what I thought. Again, I didn't spend a lot of time following it. I believe it just recently the final list got.
I think it's a week before last.
Okay,
yes.
and where are we with the controversy over the definition of which students, attendance zones versus schools, and how broad the current language actually is? Do you know where we are with that?
The agency has promulgated their rules, and attendance zone is envisioned as, or is interpreted and being enacted as a student who lives in a residence of a school that is in the bottom 25%. As it relates to the list, I believe the first list came out right before Thanksgiving, if memory serves correct. And the second list, I think, came out shortly before the holidays, was then pulled back. And I think that there were 6 or 7 schools, it was less than 10, that were actually changed on the latest list that came out. So the list was largely correct. There were these schools that I think that there were some questions around whether schools of choice should be included, and then there were some CCRPI, I think, considerations that they had to address. But this bill does not change any of the rules around eligibility as it relates to the list. And it does not change any of the rules around eligibility as it relates to the attendance zones. I would say for the population at large, what this does change is essentially a new inclusion for those students that are part of families who have been foster families.
What's the monetary cap on this right now? Is it $100 million in a 10-year sunset?
It's capped at 1% of QBE, which the budget put the governor put $120 million in the budget for the upcoming
And a
fiscal
10-year
year.
sunset.
That's correct.
So these the children of adopted and biological children of foster parents would essentially just be like competing with other folks who already kind of
Correct.
made
Yeah,
it into
this-
the bill last year.
Yeah, it's a good point. There's a cap in the bill as it relates to the total expenditures. This does not exceed that, and so there would be no more students. There'd be no more scholarships that would be given out because of this. It would just be perhaps, if the program was oversubscribed, it would perhaps be in lieu of other students.
So I'm sorry, that brought up another question, and this will be the last one. Does your legislation envision that these parents would I don't know how we're doing it as far as like who would actually get it in the event that it's oversubscribed. And if it is oversubscribed, does this envision that these parents would get it above others?
These would be
or-
moved to the front of the line, that's correct.
Okay, so.
Yep.
And you think that's very important because you really want more families to become foster?
Sure, I would.
But what about people that don't have kids? Or like people whose children are grown? I mean, don't we still want them to be?
That's another discussion for
Well,
another
no, I just meant like we
possibility.
still want them to be foster parents, right? So like, I don't know. Anyway, that's it.
Sure,
Just
yeah,
raising that point that
There,
there's only
there
a
may be
limited
other
amount of
ways.
time where, you know.
There may be other ways to incentivize the parents that do not have children, but this bill obviously would not do that.
Thank you.
Senator James?
Yes. Senator, I would like to know if all children would be eligible for this, even if they are special education, have a disability.
So there is a separate special needs scholarship that we passed out of the Senate and then expanded, I think, maybe 4 years ago. That is a separate ESA program that deals with students with a 504 or an IEP. Parents would have the option to look at either one of those if they were to, because they would qualify potentially under both of these, but they cannot take advantage of both of them. So the bill that we passed last year does ensure that students who are availing the Georgia Promise Scholarship are not also receiving other state scholarship
They can only have
dollars.
one, they can only.
As it relates to this scholarship, that is true. I am not sure whether the current special needs scholarship allows an overlapping of the goal or not. I don't want to speak to that because I'm not sure, but I do know that this one does not.
Can you let me know?
I can check on that. There's probably people in the room that know that could speak to it as well.
Senator Hatchett?
One other question, if you don't mind. Is this, someone text me, is this considered a voucher bill? I'm sure it is, right?
So this is a expansion of the eligibility under the existing ESA program, which is some people would call a voucher. Technically, in our code, it's called the Georgia Promise Scholarship account.
Thank you.
Senator Hatchett?
Thank you. Question about the bill. Obviously, this is for biological and adopted children of foster parents, and I'm sorry for my ignorance on this, but foster children, are they eligible for the scholarship as well?
So that's Senator Parent, and I just discussed that. I didn't see if you came in. So foster children are not moved to the front of the line in this bill. And if you think about it, Senator, the reason for that is the way that the bill works is parents will begin to apply on March 1st for next school year. And so there's all sorts of eligibility requirements, the 25% attendance zone, have to be a legal resident, a number of other things. The parents then go through a process, if they are approved, of applying or requesting fund reimbursements, fund payments for the allowed funds that the commission has set up. So when you think about a situation where a child has been removed from their home and they're in foster care, there is not a parent that can really guide them through that process, and foster care is temporary, and this is more of a program for students who have the stability to be in a alternative school of choice, or homeschooled. So while I would love to figure out a way for foster children to be a part of the ESA program, I haven't yet been able to do that due to the nature of the lack of stability that these kids have. There's a little bit of a challenge there to figure out how to balance, how to figure out if mom or dad or both are the ones that are registering and then filling out the forms as it relates to the approved expenses, but the student's not living with mom or dad or both, then it just becomes really difficult to
Understand.
figure that out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Senator Halper? Oh, okay. Go ahead. Number 7.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Dolezal, it's my understanding we have nearly 10,000 foster kids in our system in the state, and even though we do a little bit better than some states, I think our foster kids have about 24 months plus or minus with every foster placement, so that's not a long period of time. Part of kids being settled in a school is they're able to kind of get in and sort of find their place. Do you feel like this bill recognizes that if there is turnover, if parents are able to choose with more, in a way that's more tailored to the child's needs through this program than just putting them in the whatever zone school a parent lives in who happens to choose to be a foster parent?
I'm not sure I follow your question. I apologize.
You know, foster parents, we want to encourage foster parents. We still have 10,000 kids in our system, and there's we want to provide stability. Does the school choice option this provides empower parents to make more individualized, student-centric decisions than just to take a foster child? Hey, this is our zone school. If they make it, they make it. If they don't, they don't. Doesn't this give parents the option, multiple options?
Sure, I see what you're asking. So
to
for
meet their
this-
particular needs.
for the students, for the kids, I should say, who they have adopted, certainly.
Yeah.
I think that the part of what the spirit of this legislation was, the first bill that I carried, is the recognition that one-size-fits-all education is not, it does not often produce the best outcomes. And certainly those children coming from a foster situation into permanent residency and being adopted may indeed thrive in a different environment. And this is an option. We have charter schools that would allow that option as well. Thankfully, we see choices expanding in Georgia's education system. And this would be, I think your point, yes, would be my answer to that question.
All right. We have some public folks to sign up to speak to this or ask questions. First one we'll have is Rob Aycock. If you'll go to the podium, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Hi, everybody. My name is Robert Aycock with the Professional Association of Georgia Educators. And with no judgment towards the noble work that foster families do, we'd first like to say Paige's position is that we think it'd be better for this program to be fully implemented and go into effect before any modifications are going to be considered. But if you do want to reopen this code section, we'd also ask that you consider maybe a few other provisions to kind of help provide transparency and protections to Georgia families, possibly clarifying legislative intent on the attendance zones, requiring participating private schools to provide more information on maybe, say, retention rates or the special education services they provide, and maybe even considering a cap on tuition increases so that the vouchers provided in this program don't get priced out and families that are taking part of it don't get priced out of the schools they
Have
choose.
you talked to the author about it?
We unfortunately have not yet, but would be happy to discuss all these with him after the committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next, we have Whitney Beatty. Okay. Just please give us your name and
Sure.
who you're with, or your citizen. Okay.
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Whitney Booth. I'm very thankful to be here. Somebody left their readers. I don't know what that's supposed to indicate, but I see pretty great without them. Thank you, Senator Dolezal, for this opportunity. I get to speak a little bit about our story, our family story as it relates to foster care here in the state of Georgia, as well as how our family might be affected by this bill. My husband and I began fostering in March of 2013 here in the state of Georgia, and we fostered 4 long-term placements as well as multiple respite placements over a 9-year period. We adopted our oldest daughter, who's almost 12, in 2015, and since then we've welcomed 3 biological girls. So we have a house full of girls who are almost 12, 8, 5, and 2.5. And this bill affects our family really in a personal way. Our oldest daughter has been with us since birth, but she carries a lot of trauma. She carries trauma from being in foster care. Even though she was with us, there was a severing of a natural connection with her birth family. She carries trauma because of adoption, because she does not naturally belong in our family, although we have been blessed to make that a permanent part of our family. And because of the things that she carries, the burdens that she carries, that are no fault of her own, it affects how she is successful in social settings, particularly in school settings. So we have experienced both public school settings as well as private school settings, and because of the way that she experiences certain needs in social settings, she thrives more in smaller classroom settings. That does not particularly happen to be the case in our county. She was in a public school last year, with about 26 fifth graders, all of who had IEPs in her class. There were 2 teachers in that classroom, and so her needs were not fully met because the bandwidth was just not there. And so in our family, we have made the financial decision that has been a sacrifice for us to put her in a private school setting where she can have more social connections with her teachers and her classmates, as well as some of those trauma triggers being addressed specifically in the classroom and by the admin of the school. Our family also has a second grader, and because of logistics, we've also chosen to put her in that private school setting as well, because we just don't have the bandwidth to do multiple carpool schedules as well as multiple locations as far as education is concerned. So this bill for our family would directly impact our ability to set our daughter up for success. And so thank you very much for spending time thinking about not just the foster care kids that are here in our community who are the most vulnerable in the state, but also kids like our oldest daughter that's in our family. So thank you so much for your time. I would love to take questions now if you have any. Otherwise, yeah.
Sorry, Kip.
Sure.
Thank you so much for your for being here, Ms. Booth.
Sure.
Are the schools that you're zoned for on the list bottom?
I have not personally seen this list, but I can say that the schools that we're zoned for are actually good schools. But what we found is when you place a child who has experienced trauma, even in a good school setting, particularly because of some of the neurological needs that they have, they may or may not be met in that classroom setting. We found that even with our daughter in a public school setting with an IEP, she had a great special ed teacher, she still struggled because she did not feel seen, and it was not a felt safety type environment. So,
Sure. Parent.
11. Thank you. Thanks so much, Ms. Booth.
Sure.
Have you explored getting the special needs scholarship for your adopted daughter?
Sure. So in our case, we were in a public school setting last year, as I stated, with an IEP. It was actually attached with our daughters in that school setting. She did not qualify for the special needs scholarship just because of her diagnoses. So we did actually look into that. Unfortunately, we did not make it the full year in the school setting. I had to pull her out and homeschool her about halfway through the year due to just high anxiety attacks. We were at CHOA in the emergency room at one point. So when I say that things are better this year, they're better. But for our family, the financial sacrifice has been very significant.
All right.
One last question.
Sure.
The amount that you get is $6,500. Would that cover full tuition for one of your?
So our children actually happen to be in a hybrid school setting, and so that, again, for our daughter gives her kind of the ability to be home some and in the classroom, which for her seems to be best. And so in the hybrid setting that they're in, this actually it would not fully cover it, but it would be significant. Yes.
All right, and thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for your time.
And next we have Lila Womack.
Hey there, good afternoon. I'm Lila Womack, and I appreciate this opportunity. I think this is a wonderful bill that's come before you. My husband and I actually became a foster parent while we were dating, and I fostered 3 children during that time. And then once we were married, we together over the years fostered about 23 children, many of them quite long term. And we have adopted 3 of the children that we fostered during that time. And each one is very different. They all come from very different backgrounds, but have some kind of trauma associated with them. And education has always been something that we've struggled within our home with, trying to find the right place for each one of them to thrive in their education. So we've done a combination also similar to Mrs. Booth of homeschooling, public school, and private school, and have found that the private school that we've chosen, which is also a hybrid, tends to be a better place for each of them. Not that some of them don't still struggle in some ways in those, but because of the smaller classrooms and the dedicated care that the teachers there have given have been a wonderful us. However, having 4 children who are in that, we have 6 children total, 4 children who are in that school, it does make a really big impact on your family financially, and especially because there's a lot of things that go along when you adopt a child that, you know, are not expected in the future. You know, that just goes along with any child that you have. But you learn a lot of things as you go through this journey, and that the care is different for these kids who come from a high trauma background, and learning how to love them and to nurture them and to care for them. And I just, you know, when I heard about this, I thought, wow, what a wonderful blessing this would be to kind of release some of that burden, because we really felt like this is truly a calling of what we did to foster and adopt these children, and to kind of release some of that so that we can give them the education they need in a place that is good for them, where they can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, same questions. First, thank you so much and bless you for fostering 23 children. That is a lot. I'm curious, like on average, like how long is, would you say like your foster children are with you? What I'm trying to get is I'm trying to figure out why we should not include foster children in getting this voucher. So I'm just trying to see like how long would you say like your experience, your kids were with you in terms of fostering?
Right. So I think we tended to have maybe longer term, and I think the average is about 17 to 19 months is about the average a child is in foster care. We definitely had some that came through that we may have had for 2 weeks, but that was very, you know, few of them, maybe 9 months, 6 months. We tended in the beginning to take smaller babies simply because our children were younger, but over 15 years, we started to take older children. And then, you know, there were sibling groups we had several times, you know, so it really did vary. I mean, obviously, we adopted 3 of them, so those were very long-term.
And then, same question, are the schools that you're zoned for on this list?
I have not seen the list,
Okay.
but I do know the school that we are zoned for is not one we feel comfortable sending our children to.
Got it. And finally, would the $6,500 cover full tuition for the?
Not fully, but it would cover the majority.
Got it. All right,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Due to the time limits, and I'm going to go ahead and call a vote.
I have a question.
Yes,
Thank you.
Senator Sims.
Thank you,
What
Mr.
number?
Chairman.
Oh, ma'am?
Who was, I have a question for you, please. During the fostering period of the children, did you receive any other financial support for those children?
There is a monthly stipend kind of that you receive each month that, I mean, it's pretty minimal, but it's, and I can't even remember exactly how much it was, because sometimes we would have sibling groups, so that would change, you know, per child. I'm going to guess it was maybe $500 a month. But I would have to look back at my records to see what that is per child.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right, thank you, ma'am. All right, now be an appropriate time.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to pass Senate Bill 152, LC 492040.
Repeat that.
Y'all have a sub.
SB 152, and the LC is 492040. Do we have a sub?
Yeah.
I
Yeah, we have
apologize.
subs
Going
too.
off the agenda. How dare I? LC 492264S is in still. Still here. Still here.
All right, I got a motion. I have a second from Senator Hatchett.
Yeah. No, I was gonna say I have a comment when we get to discussion, but.
Well, I'd like to see if we can maybe somehow work in an amendment to include the actual foster children in this, but we can discuss, and then, I don't know if that be
I don't know, adding in all the foster kids across the state of Georgia into a bill, we have no fiscal note on what that would cost, or.
I would be more than,
These kids, I mean, I worked in the juvenile court for 30 years. I know that these kids often move around. So
I'm saying the foster children of those parents who foster. Because if their biological and adopted kids are included, why not include? I will say, I'm not going to support the bill regardless, but I do think if we're going to, I'm saying if we are truly rewarding fostering, I think from just a fairness standpoint, if I'm a foster kid and I come to a home and my other siblings are going to a private school and I have to be zoned for my school that my parents are saying is not good enough for their kids, why can't I go? So I'm just saying that it just doesn't seem right to me that we're doing this. So I don't know if we need a fiscal note for that.
if I could respond to that, Chairman.
The kids
Yeah, we don't have
that are in the
fiscal note for
custody
that.
of the state
I
of
don't see a
Georgia,
fiscal
foster
note on
kid is
those,
in the custody of.
But it is capped, so.
I keep taking your amendments, you keep voting against my bills, but
We're working on the other one, though. I'm going to vote for that one on the floor.
I will tell you that we tried to figure this out.
Yeah.
And I couldn't figure it out, but I would be happy to work with you to figure it out. I think that that's going to be more work probably than we have time
Okay,
for in the
that's
next few
fair.
days, but I would agree with your premise and would certainly love to figure out a way to make that happen.
Thank you.
Senator Parent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kind of is related to Senator Kemp's comment. It seems to me that several times during our testimony in support of the bill, it came up that a foster child foster children oftentimes have been through some trauma. Clearly, their upbringing with their biological parents has been disrupted, and that's a really big deal. So, to my mind, that is exactly the category of children that it would make, the most sense to look at in terms of trying to find an environment that would best suit them and help them to overcome that trauma and become productive adults, which ultimately is what the state should want, right? So I'm wondering, Chairman Dolezal, if it might make sense to, instead of doing this bill, look at the way the special needs scholarship is structured, because then maybe, if we're all in agreement that that's really the population that sort of needs it the most, we could get there perhaps with the special needs scholarship and language in there versus opening this up, especially because I note that lines 49 through 53, the definition, and listen, anyone who's taken in a foster child has my undying admiration and is doing God's work, but this does say that if you've had like a foster kid for a week at any time during the past 10 years, you would then get the scholarship forever for all of your other children. So that's pretty open to be gamed by someone, sadly, who isn't doing the God's work that these people who have provided their homes and testimonies are doing. So those are just my 2 points. I think that's too wide open, and I think I just can't support this when it seems like if we're doing this for any population, it really needs to be foster kids. So, thank you.
Thank you. I will go ahead and call the question. Are all those in favor of SB 74? I'm sorry, 152. I've got my papers out of order. Yes. LC 492264S. By committee substitute. All those in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I will vote in the affirmative for the bill, so the bill moves on. All right, next bill we have is Senate Bill 74. Senator Burns.
Excuse me, I missed the sign up. Can I still sign up? I didn't see a list to sign up, or I was preoccupied or something. Oh.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee, for your consideration for Senate Bill 64. This is a straightforward bill. 74, whatever number. Was it 74? I have a 75 as well. I think it's next. Thank you. This is Senate Bill 74, LC 492167. Is that correct?
Yes.
This is a straightforward bill. It addresses the adherence to long-standing Georgia law. So, if you look at the Georgia Code in section 1612-103, it clearly defines harmful material cannot be sold or distributed to minors, an individual under the age of 18. That became Georgia law sometime in the late 60s, 1969 or so. It was updated in the early 1980s, but it's long-standing Georgia law. Sometime in the early 80s, somewhere around 1984, Section 1612-104 was added. That section is the crux of this bill. If you'll look with me at lines 16, 17, and 18. The provisions of Code Section 1612-103 shall not apply to any public library operated by the state in any of its political subdivisions or in any library operated as a part of any school, college, or university. It's commonly called the exception clause. So, for unknown reasons to me, librarians were exempted from following Georgia law. Now, I'd like to point out, teachers were not exempted, coaches were not exempted, pastors were not exempted, rec people, you were not exempted, I was not exempted. So you have to ask your question, a simple question, why did we choose to exempt librarians? I require a convenience store owner to make the decision whether or not material that they provide is potentially harmful to minors. Convenience store owner. Librarians are professionals. Just be aware, decades ago, while I was a part of the university system, I had a senior Fulbright scholarship appointment to Handelshögskolan i Borås, which is the School of Library and Information Science in Sweden. I'm all about libraries. I love libraries. I encourage people to use libraries. But it doesn't make any sense for us to exempt the very people who should best know what would be harmful to children. So, what this bill does is it strikes 1612-104. It adds in section 2, if you'll look carefully at lines 25 through 30, it adds an affirmative defense for a librarian who may be charged with providing inappropriate or harmful material to minors. It points out in lines 29 that they demonstrate a good faith attempt to identify and remove from access to minors all physical, electronic, harmful material. This bill does not remove material from libraries. So, any adult would have access to material, but not harmful materials that would be identified in Code Section 1612-103. So it's not new law. It doesn't restrict access. At the end of the day, what it does is it protects children and requires all Georgians to follow Georgia law. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm happy to share what other states have done and how they've addressed this issue. But ladies and gentlemen, this is not controversial. This is common sense. And I'd be happy to take questions.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, to the author, appreciate the sentiment here. I think there's raises very important questions. Appreciate on line 22, you added the element knowingly,
Knowingly,
which is, brings in a kind of an element of actual knowledge, not just it's there. I'm responsible for it, but I didn't know about it. I think that's an important element. I would ask you, though, to maybe even strengthen your bill. We're certainly not at the point of making amendments, but line 26, which limits the protection to a librarian per 4324-1, my question to you would be if we were to strike that line and put under the section, if the person, make it anybody that worked in the library. My concern is the librarian might get protection, but there's a person that wasn't a licensed librarian that's working as a clerk there, maybe somebody that's responsible for the library as a department manager, wouldn't have the protection of this. So I just was contemplating striking line 26, putting in person, and then it says as a librarian, just strike that, so it's a cleanup that anyone would be protected by this affirmative defense.
if I understand that correctly, this is anyone who works in a library,
Yeah.
museum, public school, I'm asking, university. Currently, those individuals are not afforded the protection under the current code of 1612-104. I'm not opposed to that. I just want to know what the boundaries are.
Well, I'm trying to understand the code sections outside this bill. I thought I was perhaps of the wrong impression. This code section applies to librarians only, and that the exemptions for librarians?
Section 1612-104 applies to librarians only. 1612-103 is applicable to all Georgia citizens. So this area, Section 2, really deals with 1612-103, and it provides for an affirmative defense. Now, again, I hear what your concern is, and we can certainly
To your question, Mr. Chairman, to your question, it shall be an affirmative defense, this code section, if the person, and it goes, employed to work in a public library operated by the state or school system. So it's still limited to the library setting, but that would also provide the affirmative defense, because it's not only licensed librarians, I would think, that are in there.
Right.
That's all.
I have no objection to that. Be happy.
All right.
Questions?
Any other questions? All right, you want to make that, you made a motion?
We got lots of-
Oh, he's made a motion?
No, that was just a suggestion for an amendment, but you can't make it yet.
Okay.
Yeah, so, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman, the fact that it says knowingly would protect someone if a child did come into a library and read or get access to a book that is considered pornographic or whatever, they would not be subject to criminal liability, correct? I missed a
Yeah, I would say that knowingly is an interpretive word. I would say that there are currently 10 states that have similar legislation and another 4 that are currently under consideration. And according to a Washington Post article dated April of 2024, I just would like to quote this, the Post could not find an instance in which a librarian was charged under these laws. So we're not out there to criminalize librarians. We're out there to protect children. And by the way, the overwhelming majority of librarians would agree with this concept.
And Mr.
They
Chairman,
would not knowingly provide harmful material.
Senator Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are there any librarians in the audience? I would like to hear from them, and the Department of Education as well. Is there anyone present that can testify?
If I might, Mr. Chair? Hey, we got one? Good. But while our individual is coming up, let me say, I talked to the regional, specifically one-on-one, talked to the regional librarian in Augusta, Georgia, Augusta, Richmond County, which is in my district. I talked today with a librarian in Barnesville, Georgia, Lamar County, which is where at one time I spent working at Gordon State. I had a one-on-one conversation with the Chancellor of the University System of Georgia. We've had multiple discussions about this legislation. And some people feel that it would, in some way, criminalize their activity. That's not the intent. The intent
Yes,
is to
sir.
protect children. But are you, any further questions from me, and then I'll step aside.
But since we, hold on a second. So-
Just before Senator Burns leaves, my intent is the same. I'm probably even more conservative than you are when it comes to what children should and should not be exposed to. I've been in a school setting, kindergarten through 12th grade, but what I'm concerned about is currently, how do schools select materials for placement in the library? I'm sure we just don't go get a box of books and throw them on the shelves. So can I hear from a librarian and also from the Department of Ed, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman? Thank you.
Would you step to the mic?
Absolutely. I can kind of speak a little bit on for media specialists. We don't really control how, the department does not control what they get. It is at the local level. I do know that there is a national association for media specialists for, what are the most popular books? How can we make sure that we're getting those into our system? The funding for the books is usually local funds and not state funds. So it really is at that local level for where they're getting the books. There are processes in place already for what books are on the shelf. But I'll also point out, with libraries, you could have 2,500 books that are everywhere, but there's one person to be able to monitor everything. So just kind of, it might be hard to know exactly what books are in the library for the simple fact that there's so many of them, and there might be books that are 30 years old that no one has put into a computer system to know one way or the other if it's on the shelves. I mean, I've gone to the library and you see how old the books are when you open it up, and there's the card still in there from, I might be aging myself, but it is true. Does that answer your question, Senator Sims?
That's kind of unimaginable, because I think with most libraries now computerized completely, and it should be pretty easy for them to look to see what books are on those shelves. So that's kind of hard for me to believe. Do we have a librarian in the audience?
I hadn't seen
No
anybody, so
librarians?
Thank you.
My mother was one before he asked a question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chairman Burns, I apologize that I hope I'm not being repetitive because I had to step out for a quick emergency, so I missed part of your presentation. So one question is, I'm assuming, since this applies to colleges and university level,
It does.
I'm assuming that what standards, that's obviously not maybe in the law, but not on this page, like what standards apply at different age levels?
Generally, if you will look at section, if you have the code section, 1612-103, it defines any person who sells or loans for monetary consideration or otherwise furnish or disseminate to a minor. So this is an individual under the age of 18.
Well-
So the key is the librarian would determine the age appropriateness of the material, and they'll have children's sections, and they'll have youth or young adult sections, and then they'll have adult sections. Now, that's the librarian's discretion. I would suggest that one thing that we can accomplish through this bill is to highlight the importance of correctly classifying material. And that if an individual, a librarian, or anyone really who says it's inappropriately shelved, it's inappropriately classified, then that could be corrected. Again, we're not saying remove the book from the library. We're saying put the book or the material in an appropriate area, okay? But at college and university levels, while most of the individuals who would utilize that space are over 18 or over, certainly in the libraries where I've worked, at libraries that I've been responsible for over the years, we have a number of youth and children who come to the library because you have a college of early childhood education, so you have age-appropriate books there. Those professionals would do the same thing in a college and university setting. You know, I've heard all kind of scenarios that would suggest that an individual might stumble onto an inappropriate piece of material. When that occurs, then the librarian's responsibility is don't check it out to the child. And I would suggest that if it were appropriate and the parent or guardian felt it necessary, they could provide that to the child. But that's not the library's responsibility or the school's responsibility, either school or university's responsibility.
So follow up on that. So it sounds like, you know, if I am getting my master's and I take my kids to the library with me, and they're with me and they pull something off the shelf, that's on me.
You know, the fact is, was it shelved in an adult section?
No, I'm saying yes. I'm saying it's, yes.
Then
I'm
the
saying
trick
it's shelved
is
in an adult
that
section.
would be the responsibility of the parent or guardian to say this is an inappropriate section for you. Now, I acknowledge that there are some very bright young minds out there, and some of them are vociferous readers, and we're delighted. So sometimes they'll plow through that whole children's section and they can't find anything that really interests them. Okay, have that parent or guardian go to the librarian and identify appropriate material for that child.
So I
Remember now, it's knowingly providing that material, and there is this opportunity to have an affirmative defense.
Right.
Okay.
So I do.
We've
Let
got
me.
other
I didn't get
questions,
to.
and
Well, I
Senator
didn't get to
Dolzal
my.
had his hand up
All right,
before
go
you
ahead.
had
Go
yours
ahead.
up. So
Well, can I ask my last?
let's get to Senator Dolzal first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Burns. So I want to make sure I understand the current state of Georgia law.
Right.
If there is a library next door to a Barnes & Noble bookstore,
Correct.
as it relates to the obscenity laws in the state of Georgia, the library would have complete immunity under the law, and currently, I'm not saying this is happening, but they could provide any material that they wanted to at the library, where right next door at my imaginary Barnes & Noble, it would be a crime to provide that information or provide that material to a minor. Is that correct?
Senator is correct.
And what you are doing here is you are saying that the libraries in the state of Georgia will comply with the same obscenity law, will live under the same Miller test from the Supreme Court relative to the definition of obscenity from 1973, I think, that we've lived under for a long time, in terms of the availability of information to minors. Can you think of any reason, Senator, why a bookstore should have to live under different regulations than a library, and why a library would be completely immune from our obscenity law?
I cannot imagine how a commercial bookstore could not be under the current code of obscenity laws, which is 1612-103. And for whatever reason, decades ago, we carved out the professionals, the individuals who best know the materials, and said, you're exempt.
And to Senator Parent's question, in a scenario where you had, call it mixed company in terms of ages with access to a library, what you were attempting to do on line 29 and 30 is to basically say that as long as the person running the library made a good faith attempt to identify and remove from access to minors all physical or electronic material harmful to minors, then they've done their job.
That's exactly right.
Can you think of any reason why we would not want librarians in the state of Georgia to provide a good faith attempt to assure that material that is harmful to minors is not in fact available to minors?
I can think of no reason why a librarian would not want to comply with these requirements.
Any other questions?
I had what was my last one, if I'm allowed to.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So just so I'm clear, you said the librarians are trained and they use their judgment as part of the
They do, but
standards?
so does the Barnes and Noble bookstore manager, and so does the convenience
Right.
store owner, and so does the teacher in a classroom.
Right.
Because you remember that teacher in the classroom is currently under the Georgia statutes dealing with
Sure.
harmful material.
So my question though is, and maybe it's kind of just, I guess, would play out as part of any action brought under this, but given that outside some pretty major lines, a lot of it is subjective. Like if you take the young adult category, I bet there's plenty in the young adult category at Barnes & Noble that many people in the legislature would at least say that they were totally opposed to and found harmful to minors, to be honest with you. So that's where I'm just struggling with just it didn't sound like we have a bright line standard in the law of like, this is how the legislature has categorized every book. So as far as like the intent, I hear you and I think it works. As far as the operationality, I don't really see how it could actually like, I mean, I don't know. I think it would be probably like a tiger without any teeth, but you know, there are worse things.
I would suggest that 99.8% of Georgians follow the statute, and they interpret it, and they have a good faith effort to comply with it.
I wish anyone had any idea what the statutes we passed are. You have a lot more confidence than I do, Senator,
Okay.
but thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
I have my hand up.
Yeah, public input.
You had your, well, we got to call the question.
I know, I wanted to ask a question.
Okay.
You know, you started out telling us that everybody was under this rule except librarians. So why would I was here when all of this first passed. Why were librarians left out in the first place?
Why were they excluded?
Excluded.
Why were they excluded from this? That happened sometime in the early 80s, Senator?
No, it happened in the
Well, then
90s?
I'm happy
In the
for
90s.
I'm happy for you to enlighten me, but the best information I have suggests that this has been an exemption for some period of time.
It has been, and I was one, okay.
Okay.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to pass of Senate Bill 74 LC 492167 and make a motion, and make an amendment at appropriate time.
All right, we have a motion to pass. Have a second from Senator Lozelle. You wish to offer your amendment?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm offering this as a friendly amendment to the gentleman. If members could insert the word, the amendment would have the word person inserted on the very end of line 25. It would strike line 26 in its entirety. Insert person in line 25, strike 26 in its entirety. And then on line 27, at the beginning of the line, before the word employed, insert the word is. Between the words in public, insert the word a. And strike the words as a librarian. So 27 would say is employed, strike the word as librarian, and then insert between in and public the word a. I shopped this with counsel and I think this accomplishes what we're trying to do. And again, Mr. Chairman, my purpose for this, it would provide this protection, this affirmative defense for any person working in a library, not just someone that's a certified librarian.
I'm happy to accept the amendment, Veg Council.
No.
The only suggestion I would make, Mr. Chairman, is I think we do need to include the word charged. So it would be the person charged is.
The person charged
Right.
is, okay.
Is employed in a public library, so.
So
everything
change the
Senator
word
Sessler
individual to
recommended, just
person.
including the word charged after person.
Well,
Okay.
Public library
well,
and school library.
well, let me restate, Mr. Chairman. I think it's, the language would say, if I would leave individual charged, would stay in place at 26. Is a person, so it's strike librarian in such terms, strike on line 26 from librarian all the way to the end of that line. And in its place, put person.
You've already got the
I need-
first person.
I
If
need
the
clarification,
person
please.
charged.
I'm going with what council said. It would say, it shall be an affirmative defense of prosecution in this code section if the individual charged is a person employed to work in a public library operated. Is that correct?
If I may, just a cleaner way to do it would be if the person charged is
Okay.
employed in a public library.
Is employed, that's good.
If the person charged is employed in a public library operated, and so on and so forth.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I have a question about. I was saying earlier how I've been around the library, because my mother, before she became a principal, she was a librarian in the school system. And then after she retired, after 42 years, she went to.
Well, right now, we have a motion on the
No,
floor.
but it's, I'm saying, is that correct? Because they were volunteering after that. They're not always employed there. And some of the students that they train there also check books out. So I'm saying, why can't we leave it the way it was instead of changing it?
Well, right now, he's making a motion. If you want to vote against the motion, then you vote against the motion.
I'm saying it's incorrect, so that's the only
Do
reason.
I have a second?
Because it doesn't.
I have a second on the motion.
Mr. Chairman, to the lady's point, I'm trying to protect more people than fewer people. If we limit it as it's drawn now, only librarians are protected. Other folks working there could get charged with this and be subject to this.
All right, a motion and a second. We're going to call the question, so all those,
Are we not hearing from the people signed up to speak?
we are out of time.
Oh, okay.
We're supposed to end it 5 minutes ago.
Can we
So all those in favor of the
can't table it to?
Yeah.
LC 4921, is that correct? Do what?
Vote amendment.
Yeah, as amended. LC 492167.
Vote on the amendment first.
Okay. All those in favor of the amendment as stated by Ledge Council, raise your hand.
About,
All those in opposition to the amendment?
I am, because I think it's incorrect.
Okay.
It is incorrect.
All right, the amendment passes. Now we have a committee substitute. All those in favor of Senate Bill 74, which is that right? SB LC 492167 as amended by committee substitute. Raise your hand. All those in opposition? And the motion passes. The bill moves on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Who was the last? What, Senator Seal?
It was Senator Still. He has to go present at another
Okay.
meeting.
All right, we'll have to come back to that bill another day. So we'll move it Thursday. So having no other business, we'll go ahead and call this meeting adjourned.